Hi, my name is Nils Naujoks and I'm a professional sim racer for G2 Esports. Overall, there's huge debate in sim racing whether or not hardware can make you faster. I don't think in particular if you have the talent, the hardware will make you shine or put you at the back of the field. In the past 2 decades, sim racing equipment has made a major leap. Of course, we were taking deeper takes onto pedals, racing wheels, PCs and of course monitors as well. In particular, the monitor in sim racing is like one of the few connections you have to the car. Everything is perceived visually in the first place, and therefore it's really important to have high frame rates, low response rates of the monitor, because this gives you a competitive advantage in the end and makes it easier for you to perceive what the car is doing.
Between the two of them. The inside of Coates. Marcus gets too heavily involved. And that's Whitehead and Coates.
I should be.
The Silverstone National Circuit is our venue this weekend as the MSL FastR Touring Car eSeries with Power Max Racing, powered by VRRC, gets the pointy end of the championship season. 2 races around the National Circuit this weekend, 2 on the International next weekend, and then the Brands Hatch Grand Prix Circuit will play host to the final rounds of what has been a very competitive championship, one that continues to deliver not just great action but plenty of surprises, and has also kept the race director and the clerk of the course very busy as well. Witness the fact that they had lots of judicial work to sort out after Croft. Senna Proctor's race 2 win went by the board because he got a time penalty for contact, so we had yet another new winner in Max Goff, so he adds his name to the list of winners. But after a stellar performance at Croft, Mike Epps comes here again laden with ballast but also ahead in the championship. Behind him, Max Goff is up to 2nd, Rob Butler 3rd, but he is missing today's races because about, an hour or so ago, he became a dad, so he's got other things on his mind, nappies primarily. 4th in the championship, Robbie Stapleford, then Callum Newsham, who had an awful time at Croft, having just got up to the lead of the championship, and Dave Marshall has also slipped down to 6th, but he is one of the few drivers, certainly the only one in that championship fight, who doesn't lose points thus far by a points penalty for infringement. He's kept out of trouble, and with a good run round 2 races here, I think he can be back in the mix. David Addison and Andy McEwan with you. Well, we've said it all season, Andy. Great racing. The Silverstone National Circuit always delivers action. It's a fairly simple lap. The drivers don't necessarily like it, but it just lends itself to good, close touring car racing, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favourite circuits to go and watch racing at as well. When you're sat in the Luffield grandstands, you've got a big crowd around you, the atmosphere is always brilliant, and you're guaranteed action. You've got these long straights where you can get a bit of a slipstream, and they're followed by big braking zones down at Beckett's and also into Brooklands as well at the end of the Wellington Straight. So 2 or 3 really good overtaking opportunities. It's very, very difficult to escape the pack around this circuit because there are so few corners for you to make a real difference in your lap time, so you tend to get a very closely bunched field of cars, and when you then stick touring car drivers in those cars, the racing can often get a little bit physical, which certainly I've got no complaints about.
Clock of the course might argue with that. And the other nice thing about the Silverstone National Circuit, in fact any configuration of Silverstone, is it's nice and wide. So you're right about the big braking zones, but you've also got the width of the road to make an overtake. So we are with only 3 events left: Silverstone 1, Silverstone 2, and then our second visit to Brands Hatch. National Circuit, International Circuit at Silverstone, Grand Prix track at Brands, and qualifying is coming up. Indeed, the cars will hit the circuit ready for that qualifying session. Now, then we look forward to race 1. Results of that with the top 12 reversed gives you the grid for race 2. So, before we start worrying about times and the point for pole position, let's have a look at the Silverstone National Lap. Martin Richards is the guy.
Hi, my name is Martin Richards and I drive the number 61 Power Max Racing liveried machine in this weekend's Touring Car eSeries. Now, some of you may know this already, but I am not actually an accomplished real racing driver, nor am I an accomplished sim racing driver. I am actually a professional drift driver. So, I'm going to take you on a hot lap with a difference. Here we are in the virtual version, or the virtual replica, of the Driftworks R32 Nissan Skyline, which I drive in the Driftmasters European Championship. So without further ado, let's get into it. This car is around about 700 horsepower, rear wheel drive, so as you can imagine it is pretty lively and drifts very easily. So we're going to make our way up the gears, through the start-finish straight, and then we're going to want to clutch, kick and aim towards the pit wall, and then enter into cops on the handbrake, slowing the car down a gear, and then back on the power and try and feed the car as wide as possible. One transition, and then into maggots. One quick transition down a gear onto the handbrake, slow the car down and bring back it onto club straight. Once on club straight, want to accelerate into 5th gear as fast as possible under the bridge, and then it's a quick clutch kick and a transition in to the Brooklands complex. Brooklands into Luffield, and we're onto the home straight now. Apex the corner as late as possible. Wider lines as you can get out of the corner, and then it's flat on the gas. 5th gear all the way through the finish line. And that is a lap of Silverstone National Circuit drifting.
Now, you don't need me to make the point that if you do a lap like that in qualifying, you are going to destroy tyres and not exactly get a decent lap time. But Drift King Martin Richards will be one to watch, absolutely, because he's been getting quicker and quicker throughout the season. Right, pole positions this year. Mike Epps has got 2 of them. Max Edmondson has got 1, Robbie Stapleford has got 1, and Charlie Oliver has bagged 1 as well. Are we going to have a different driver at the top of the times? Let's see. Short, sharp laps around here, Andy. So finding clear track space, absolutely crucial.
Yes, it is. You can get a benefit from running behind a car that's of a similar pace to you because of that slipstream that I mentioned early on. You can, in a good couple of tenths of a second per lap, if you're tucked up in that sort of pocket of air behind the car ahead. But if you're significantly faster than that car, just going to end up tripping over them when you get to any of the braking zones. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some teammates working together. We saw a bit of this earlier on in the year at Snetterton, which is another very high average speed circuit with long straights. We saw the Riggs eSport drivers in particular working together there to try and improve their lap times in qualifying. Might see a little bit more of that in this session too. And it's important that you find those extra, not just tenths, but hundredths, even thousandths of a second. The practice times from the session that finished about 5 minutes ago are insanely tight. The entire field covered by less than a second, and actually the top sort of dozen nearly covered by just 1/10 of a second. It's going to be very, very tight, and if you're even a slight fraction off your game, you could find yourself mired a long way down the grid.
It's going to be interesting as well to see how the ballast affects you around here. Mike Epps, there he is, 75 kilos on board, championship leader, triple winner, and perhaps on target to take the title, but he's not out of the woods yet. Max Goff now is the opposition. 97 points to Max, 103 for Mike Epps. So despite the fact you get the feeling that Mike has just been the dominant driver, he's only 6 points ahead after that really duff brace of races that he had at Snetterton. But is he going to be a champion? He's not only dominating in terms of race wins this, he's also blitzing everybody else in the mini eSeries at the moment, and he's got 75 kilos of weight on board. Now Max Goff therefore carries 66. Interestingly, of course, Dave Marshall, we touched on looking at the championship situation, he falls to 6th, he sheds a lot of weight, so he's only got 33 kilos. Could that be an explanation for why he might be able around here to gain good results, gain points back in the championship? Is it going to be a benefit to him having had a bad weekend at Croft, losing some of the weight?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the general pattern we've seen for most drivers this year. They have a good weekend, gain the weight for the next weekend, and then they seem to struggle a little bit. Callum Newsham was a case in point, wasn't he,
Yes.
at Croft? He had that double victory at Snetterton and then struggled to get into the points at Croft. He too, I think, is one that I'm watching this weekend. He sheds a lot of that weight, not all of it. He's still going to have 39 kilos on board the Hyundai. But that is a car that will also go well here at Silverstone. The i30N has a very good engine. It's good in a straight line. So a couple of drivers like Callum, like Dave that you mentioned. Senna Proctor, another as well, I think, who we started to see a flash of real potential from a week ago. He needs some good points, but he's still within a race win's worth of points of the top of the championship. So that little group of drivers that aren't carrying too much ballast, they need to perform really today.
Yeah, and Jack Keithley is another one that started the year really well at Browns, but got roughed up in the Donington races and again at Croft. So he's somebody else that if he can keep out of trouble, the Williams eSports driver, he should be able to fight back. Now, David Ward was a latecomer to the ball, has been getting on with life pretty effectively, and aboard number 69 then, he has had an 11th place as his best result thus far. Charlie Oliver, he's got one pole to his name and he's topping the times at the moment from Max Bird, who often seems to show well in practice and qualifying sessions, but doesn't have the same luck in races. Alex Toth-Jones currently third, and Jack Keithley fourth fastest as Charlie Oliver goes for the pit lane.
Yeah, Charlie Oliver dives in, having set the fastest time of 57.2, excuse me. Fastest lap in practice was a 57.217, so that's a pretty good representation of the pace that they're aiming for here. Keithley second, Bird in third, with Toth-Jones fourth and Dave Marshall up there in fifth place. Jordan Brennan languishing a bit down in 14th position, but Jordan is another of those drivers that's within 20 points or so of the championship lead. Currently sits seventh in the championship standings, and the driver looking for a good pair of results if possible today. Coates here comes out of Luffield corner, again down in 17th. You'd expect a bit more from Max, I would have thought. Comes out of Woodcote, easy flat through there in these cars. Across the start finish line, does he improve on 17th position? No, actually he doesn't, despite having a nice slipstream from one of the Peugeots ahead.
And also, despite losing weight for this weekend, as off the road there aboard 63 with a bit of help, Max Goff. Now, Stuart Lyons was in the wars at Croft. He got excluded from one of the races as well for lots of contact over the weekend, so he lost a race finish and therefore lots of championship points as well. Stuart's on -4 in the championship now, because whatever he scored, he's got 7 championship penalty points to take off, and getting involved, it looked there, with Max Goff. Now, what about Robbie Stapleford? Because he too has been a race winner, and he's a long, long way back at the moment, only 19th behind Max Coates. The sole Cupra then coming up towards the timing line with only 7 minutes into the second half of the session now, only 7 minutes to go.
Yeah, Stapleford looking pretty racy on this lap. I reckon he can definitely go quicker than his time that he's set so far. Let's see, 19th place he was, and, well, yeah, again, stays there, actually. They're finding it trickier than I expected to find significant improvements. A lot of them, of course, were out in that practice session earlier on, though, so they are able to get up to speed pretty quickly, and maybe struggling then to find any further pace as the session goes on. Stuart Lyons, actually, I know we're seeing Kenny Press here coming out of Cops Corner. He, too, has just started the lap, but Stuart Lyons was 9th fastest in the practice session, so Stuart is actually going quite well this weekend. I'm going to resist the temptation to make a comment about how there are only 4 corners at Silverstone. Maybe that's got something to do with it. But Stuart is doing a good job. At least he was in practice. So, yeah, maybe we'll see something out of Lyonsy today.
Yes, he's down to 18th though now in the qualifying. We've got 22 effectively for these 2 races, and Max Goff second in the championship. We saw him being elbowed aside. He's only 21st. So as Isaac Smith, double winner at Donington, goes across the line, 6th fastest, he is a 10th down on Charlie Oliver for the top of the times. Isaac Smith then 6th quickest, but we expect something out of Max Goff before the very end. Now, what about the Newshams? Dave Newsham is currently 10th. Callum is 13th. It almost did him a disservice, didn't it, winning the 2 races at Snetterton, because he got all that weight, couldn't deal with it at Croft, and has slithered back down in the championship, Newsham Jr., to 5th.
Yes, there was some good news for the Newshams, though, wasn't there, at Croft, with Dave finally getting his first podium of the season with a 3rd place in race 1. We've always known the potential was there for Dave Newsham to do well. Finally was able to realise that potential a week ago. So too, in a way, was Senna Proctor. As I said, he had a pretty strong points haul, actually. Didn't make the podium in either of the races at Croft, but the last 2 or 3 weekends, really, he's looked like he's been knocking on the door, hasn't he, of getting some really, really good results. And Senna Proctor 11th quickest right now, but look how tight it is. If he could find another 10th of a second, he'd move up another row on the grid, 10th and a half, and he could be well inside the top 10.
I mean, the whole field at the moment is covered by under a second, which you kind of anticipate around a short lap like this, or the Brands Indy circuit. We had a look at Kenny Press a little while ago. He was 22nd at the time as Senna Proctor goes for the pit lane. Kenny Press, great sim racing enthusiast, and he's yet to score points, but enjoying himself despite the level of competition perhaps going against him a little bit. Max Goff is up into 16th, but still, and you're riding with him, needs to get a shuffle on here as he heads up towards Maggots then. Stand on the brakes, go into the Beckett's hairpin, off the Grand Prix circuit onto the National Circuit now, onto Wellington Straight. Traffic is up the road, and he's running out of time to get himself up to the front of the grid, as he's just dropped a place as others go quicker around him.
Yeah, Stuart Lyons jumps up into 16th position now. He's right on the coattails, actually, of Max Coates in 15th, Callum Newsham 14th, Brennan 13th. Some quick drivers at the moment, not making the top 10. Max Goff, one of them. Max Goff, second in the championship. This is, I think, the highest he's been in the points this year.
Yes.
So it's probably the most weight that he's had to carry, 66 kilos. And he bails from the pit lane anyway on that lap. James Merrill's was the car that you could see in the distance. He was actually getting away from Max on that lap. Does that mean that Merrill's is about to improve? Answer, no, stays in 21st.
Goff might be struggling with the weight, I agree, but Mike Epps is also struggling because he's only 19th and we've got 3 minutes and change on the clock. So the top two in the championship are currently looking to start in Brackley. They're that far back on the grid. This is Jack Keithley, second, 900ths shy of Charlie Oliver as he breaks the beam then. And down towards Copse, that lap is not an improvement, so he stays second. It's an all Audi front row at the moment.
Yeah, Mike Epps, you make the point about Mike struggling. I hadn't spotted that actually, but he was only 18th fastest in practice, and he's about a 10th of a second slower at the moment than he managed in the practice session as well. You don't think of this circuit as being one that would really be affected by the weight. I mean, there's no undulations. Yes, there are some tight corners, but you know, not as many as you have at certain other circuits like Alton Park or Croft, for example. But clearly, because it is so evenly matched and the margins between each car are so slender, that ballast clearly is affecting things. There is Mike, hard at work, although he never looks too flustered, does he, behind the wheel? Always looks, well, bored, quite frankly, but I'm going to go with calm and reserved as he eases his way through Brooklands Corner into Luffield. Tricky direction change there, and this corner just goes on forever and ever and ever. You wanted to get on the throttle, and the car's understeering wide. Mike just about kept it within the white lines there, though. Comes out of Woodcote, back across the start-finish line. Can he improve? Well, he's got to find almost a 10th of a second just to get into the top 15, and he finds none of it. Stays a disappointing 17th.
Yeah, I mean, he moved up to 17th a lap ago, but doesn't improve from there. One driver that has improved into the top 10, pause, checks it's not April the 1st, is Stuart Lyons, who is now 2/10ths or a 5th of a second shy of the top. But Stuart Lyons, there he is in the top 10, and Stuart Lyons in mid-pack then for the start of the first race. It'll be interesting to see what he can do with there. We understand Isaac Smith and Charlie Oliver have got themselves together out on track somewhere. Charlie still on pole, Isaac Smith 7th. But yes, going back to what you said early in the session, Andy, about Stuart Lyons going nicely, evidence of it, he's in the top 10 with really only 2 more laps to ring out of this.
Yeah, again, possibly car advantage is helping him. As I said, the Hyundai should be good around here, but Dave Newsham also, I think, is demonstrating that with 4th quickest at the moment for Newsham Senior. As I think that is Dave, is it not? No, it's Callum going to the inside of Isaac Smith. Isaac Smith's dropped down to 7th then. He was 6th fastest in practice, so that's more or less where you'd expect him to be, I suppose. Isaac Smith, having lost all of that weight outside of the top 10 in the championship now, ballast free this weekend, unlike Callum Newsham. Having said confidently at the start of the season that Callum Newsham and Senna Proctor would go well now that they've lost the weight, that's not really what's happening, is it? Proctor is 30th, Callum Newsham is 50th place. Okay, they're both within 4/10ths of a second of pole position. Around here, that's
It is indeed, and right now Charlie Oliver then on pole, heading the real racer class, of course. Jack Keithley with him on the front of the grid, and he heads the sim class. Dan Zelos we've not really touched on, but he is 3rd ahead of Dave Newsham, then Max Bird and Alex Toth-Jones. It's Isaac Smith 7th, Dave Marshall 8th, David Ward 9th, Stuart Lyons rounds out the top 10, Jack McIntyre is 11th ahead of Max Edmondson, Max Coates, Senna Proctor, Jordan Brennan, Callum Newsham, Mike Epps 17th, Max Goff 18th ahead of Martin Richards, then Robbie Stapleford a long way back, James Merrill's 21st, Kenny Press 22nd. So it's another really jumbled grid.
Yeah, most drivers are managing to carry over their practice pace, but Alex Toth-Jones is one that perhaps isn't. He was third fastest in practice and a tenth quicker than he's gone in this session, so watch for the number 13 car to possibly improve in the latter stages. Just ahead of him is Max Bird, and that's where he's staying at the moment because he will not improve. The session is over, he's heading for the pit lane. Last laps being completed, then there is the Peugeot of Alex Toth-Jones. Last opportunity to improve on 6th place on the grid. He can't quite do it. Drivers really seem to have peaked quite early in this session, don't they? Not many late improvements.
No, you're right, and that I think is something we find in real-world touring car qualifying at Silverstone. It does seem sometimes that the bulk of the times are done by the sort of 2/3 mark. But Charlie Oliver versus Jack Keithley. Can Jack wring anything else out of this on the last lap as he comes up towards the line? Charlie Oliver looking then for a second pole of the season, add another point in the championship for so doing as he comes then Jack Keithley over the line. He goes a little quicker, but not quick enough then. So he's 800 shy at the end rather than 9, but a good session that. And Charlie Oliver then goes to the top from Jack Keithley second, Dan Zelos third fastest ahead of Dave Newsham and Max Bird. Alex Toth-Jones rounds out the top 6 ahead of Isaac Smith, Dave Marshall, David Ward and Stuart Lyons in the top 10. After that, there's Max Coates ahead of Jack McIntyre, but with Mike Epps 17th and Max Goff 18th, they have got work to do. So, a second pole of the year for Charlie Oliver, and Andy is on his way to the broadcast, the interview room, to have a word with Charlie Oliver.
Yeah, thank you, David. Well, Charlie is with me now. What a close qualifying session that was. Just 8/100ths of a second in the end. You managed to nab pole position by. It was always going to be tight, though, wasn't it, around here?
Yeah, I think so. Jack and I have been pretty close in the final few races as well. Always on the same piece of tarmac. And actually, I just came in the pits after I'd done my final run. No fuel left. And I could see on the timer that he's still on a lap and he'd done 2 sectors which were green, personal best. So I just thought, is he going to beat me or not? And it was just about enough.
Yeah, only just, but that is enough in the end to give you the pole position. Your second of the year, the previous one coming at Snetterton. Now, we all remember what happened at Snetterton. We had a great race, but unfortunately, you just lost out on the race win. What's it going to take to go one step higher in this one?
I think good start. That'd be absolutely critical. Thankfully, we have a bit of space around this track, so you can actually fight and overtake, I suspect. But yeah, just basically a perfect, every lap perfect, no mistakes from me. That's what it's going to need.
And tyre conservation could come into this as well, I think. I just saw a track temperature of 30 degrees. That left front gets punished around here, doesn't it? How much is that on your mind?
Yes, race simulation runs pretty tough, final couple of laps, but you know, you just have to keep that in mind. You can't drive the car like you stole it on the final 2 or 3 laps. So yeah, just got to be careful.
Well, that sounds like a plan, Charlie. Congratulations on your second pole of the year. Best of luck for the race.
Thank you guys.
Charlie Oliver then on pole position for the second time this year here at the Silverstone National Circuit. Race 1, David, is shaping up to be another really, really exciting one.
Absolutely right. And just looking at Max Coates, for example, 11th, shedding weight. He carried 45 kilos last time because he was a newcomer and gets rid of that. But of course, he doesn't score points as a guest in the championship in the AOC Gaming Hyundai. So wherever he finishes, people will move up one spot for the purposes of points. So Charlie Oliver, Jack Keithley then on the front row of the grid, Audis both. And remember, as far as weight is concerned, Charlie Oliver is now ballast free, whereas you've got for the man alongside him, Jack Keithley, 15 kilos. Second row of the grid then, Dan Zelos lines up third, and it is Dave Newsham with 0 weight, 4th on the grid. Max Bird starts 5th, Alex Toth-Jones 6th, light cars both. Isaac Smith is next on the grid with 9 kilos. He starts 7th. Dave Marshall alongside him has 33. On the next row, you've got David Ward, who will go from 9th. He is ballast free, so is Stuart Lyons. Max Coates likewise. And then next up, you get to Jack McIntyre. And he is another driver who was late into the championship, has yet to get himself into the top 10 for points, so he is weight free. So too is Max Edmondson next. Then you've got Senna Proctor with 21 kilos. Jordan Brennan then has 27 kilos in his car, Callum Newsham 39, Mike Epps 75, Max Goff 66, with Martin Richards, Robbie Stapleford, who's got 48 kilos, then James Merrills and Kenny Press rounding out the grid. So the scene is set. Silverstone, in typical Silverstone glorious weather, is good to go. It is the 1x1 staggered grid, pole on the outside, so the line, the advantage into the first corner for Charlie Oliver, as the drivers now await the last few seconds before we go racing. 20 minutes plus 1 lap. Audi's first and second on the grid. Can Charlie Oliver then convert pole position into a maiden race win? He's done it on the track, but lost it in the steward's room. But let's see whether he can do it today. Jack Keithley with him at the front of the grid. Dan Zelos, you've got to say, I would have thought is another dark horse for a win here, ballast free, and has proved to be a very feisty racer as well since he joined the championship at Snetterton. So add Zelos into the mix. And can Dave Newsham keep out of trouble, or can trouble avoid Dave Newsham long enough to give him another podium? Well, we are about to find out. I think everybody is then in the server. We should be just about ready to go as the lights will start to go red. Now 6 red lights will go on. When they all go out, race 1 at Silverstone will be go. Who's going to make the best start then? Oliver gets away smartly. Good start also by Jack Keithley on the run down towards Copse Corner. Dan Zelos makes a decent start too. He slots into 3rd place. Now, do they all survive the rigours of Copse Corner? They do, and Charlie Oliver comes out ahead. Zelos looks for a way past Keithley, but Charlie Oliver tries to make good his escape as they get Andy to the first pinch point up at Beckett's.
Yeah, this is where things can sometimes go wrong. Let's hope they're all well behaved. Max Birdlock is into 4th, ahead of Dave Newsham, who's also got Isaac Smith, I think, trying to find a way past him as they go down the Wellington Straight for the first time. We are side by side for the race lead, though. The slipstream now really starting to come into effect. It's Charlie Oliver and Jack Keithley wheel to wheel in the pair of Audis into the braking zone. Dan Zelos tries to stick his nose on the inside as well. In the end, it's Oliver that retains the advantage. Keithley 2nd, Zelos 3rd, Bird in 4th. And Dave Newsham, I think, just about held on to 5th. In the inset, meanwhile, we're seeing just how busy it gets in the midfield. Mike Epps, of course, a part of that, but he and Callum Newsham, actually, both making ground early on.
Proctor has had a clash with Callum Newsham. Max Goff got involved with somebody, and as they come across the line at the end of lap 1, has Jack Keithley got a problem, because he seemed to be on the inside going through Woodcote, dropping down the order. So Charlie Oliver leads, getting away. Zelos is 2nd, Max Bird is 3rd, 4th is Isaac Smith, Toff Jones 5th, Dave Marshall's up to 6th ahead of David Ward, then Stuart Lyons 8th, Dave Newsham down to 9th, Jack McIntyre 10th, and around goes David Ward that causes drama behind Dave Newsham, has to avoid him, but Jack Keithley into the pit lane at the end of lap 1, and David Ward in real strife as he tries to get going.
And Stuart Lyons, who had just got himself into 7th place as they went out of Copse Corner, unfortunately got tripped up in all of that as well and drops to the rear of the field. That is a genuine shame. Stuart was doing well in this one. Charlie Oliver then leading. You're right, I don't know what happened to Jack Keithley, but I wonder whether maybe he's had a connection issue, because
possibly
Keithley
so
has vanished now, hasn't he, from the timing tower. So Jack Keithley, unfortunately, that might be the last we see of the Williams Esports driver. That would be a real shame. Alex Toff Jones benefits from that, though, moves into 5th as the safety car is deployed as a result, I guess, of what happened down at Beckett's that time. It gives the drivers that were delayed in all of that a chance to catch the back of the crocodile once more, and gives them a chance maybe to still get something out of the race. What it does do, though, is it stops Charlie Oliver building this quite nice advantage that he got, look, over Dan Zelos in 2nd. Charlie took full advantage of Keithley's issues to build up over a second's advantage over the rest of the pack. That, though, will now disappear.
Well, indeed, yes. Safety car, as you say, deployed. It looked as though Jack Keithley, and I agree about the connection dramas, was off the track. He wasn't necessarily in the pit lane, but he was on that inside, like the hard shoulder, if you like, on the inside of Woodcote Corner. But we'll see whether he has been able to continue in the race as Charlie Oliver then comes up towards the timing line. All of this counts within the 20 minutes before you get the regulation lap tagged on at the end. So Charlie Oliver at reduced pace leads ahead of Dan Zelos. 3rd is Max Bird. Looking for the safety car that's out there somewhere. Isaac Smith runs 4th. 5th is Alex Toff Jones and Dave Marshall 6th. Max Coates is 7th, and don't forget he doesn't score points, so for points you move everybody up. That's Newsham, Proctor, and then Mike Epps 10th on the road, 9th for points. Where's Max Goff? Only 15th on the road, 14th for points. It's a virtual safety car, so although the races under safety car conditions, it is a virtual safety car rather than actually sending out the safety car itself. So Charlie Oliver has everybody stacked up behind him, and I suspect we might be able to go racing at the end of this lap. Now that everybody has caught back up again, and Jack Keithley shown as being there in 20th place. Is he still in the race? Yes, he is, and let's see whether or not he's going to be able to make progress from there. This safety car really helps him.
Yeah, it does, although I'm not convinced he's going to quite catch the back of the queue before the race gets back underway, because that's happening now. Look, green flag's back out, so we are back to full racing conditions once more. That's the joy of these virtual safety cars. We can sort of fast-track the whole process. As soon as everyone's caught up, which most of them have, we can get the race back underway again. And what a good restart it was from Charlie Oliver. Already he's got 3/4 of a second of that advantage over Dan Zelos back. Zelos instead having to sort of watch his mirrors here, because Max Bird and Isaac Smith are starting to apply the pressure to him. Charlie Oliver already getting away. If you can find yourself 1.5 seconds of a cushion here, that really is worth a lot. It's quite hard for the cars behind to bridge that sort of a gap, and that might mean that Charlie Oliver can then spend the next bit of the race saving those tyres.
Now, what about Max Coates in the meantime? He's on the back of Dave Marshall, so as they come through Brooklands then, Max Coates hard at work, doesn't have the heating on at home, kicks his woolly hat on, and he's all over the back of Dave Marshall, trying to fend off Dave Newsham at the same time. So he's in a proper real-world race here, isn't he? He's got Newsham and Proctor and Epps behind him, but he's looking for a way past Dave Marshall then. 3 second places for the 10 Temps coaching driver in the Peugeot 308. Dave Marshall, one of those from the sim racer class. Down towards Copse Corner they go. Oliver, meantime, up front, getting away. He was briefly over a second clear of Dan Zelos.
Yeah, absolutely, and a 57.29 is right down on qualifying pace as well, straight out of the blocks after that virtual safety car, so that's a really impressive pace. At the moment, no one can live with him, but is he pushing those tyres too hard in the early stages? That is a question we'll only have an answer for in about 10 or 15 minutes' time. With Jordan Brennan, that is Callum Newsham in front of us, and this is the fight for 12th place. Callum is struggling, isn't he, for some reason, at a track that I really thought he and that car would work well at. He is falling down the order rather than moving forwards. Brennan on the inside line should be able to complete the move. Yes, he does. Golf goes ahead of Hyundai. Mike Epps, on the other hand, though, is making progress. Top 10 now for Epps, and that's important. It means he's scoring some half-decent points, and if he stays towards the back of the top 10, he'll be near the pointy end of the race 2 grid.
Yeah, Max Goff, though, his championship rival, is only in 15th place, as there through is Alex Toth-Jones, having his best showing of the season thus far, running in 5th place weight-free, going after Isaac Smith, who's got 9 kilos of weight on board. Also good to see Max Bird having a good run further up the road. He runs 3rd at the moment. He has had a 2nd place as his best, but he's been desperately unlucky. Much underrated, very quick driver is Max Bird. He's on the tail of Dan Zelos then. There is Smith. Toth-Jones is behind him. Dave Marshall still hanging on to 6th place. Jack Keithley has caught, and he is starting to make progress. He's up to 19th.
Yeah, so he's a few places out of the points. Top 15 get points and top 12 get reversed for the race 2 grid. So those are his 2 targets, really. Score some points and try and benefit from the grid reversal. On board with Dave Marshall here, 6th position. He is the highest placed driver in the championship that is beating Mike Epps in this race. So he's the first driver, really, taking points out of the championship leader of those that are realistically in contention. Dave Marshall arrives here at Silverstone 19 points behind Epps, so any points that he can take out of the points leader are going to be very, very useful indeed. A little gaggle of Peugeots getting themselves together here, aren't they? You've got Isaac Smith, Alex Toth-Jones, Dave Marshall trying to close in on them. But Toth-Jones looks racy at the moment, doesn't he? Looks maybe a little quicker than Isaac Smith. Can he find that edge that he needs, though, to move into the top 4?
Charlie Oliver is benefiting from the Zelos-Bird battle because he's just edging away slightly, 1.3, 1.4 seconds it fluctuates. On board with Toth-Jones down to Brooklands. Tighter line for the left-hander, up the curb. Isaac Smith just there ahead of him, real racer class drivers both. And the Power Max Racing entry in the hands of Alex Toth-Jones, the man from Bradford, the Peugeot 308, still runs 5th as he comes up through Woodcote then now past the Jimmy Brown Centre on the right-hand side, past the timing line, and then down towards Copse Corner. Another lap then in the book, but he's not quite close enough to make a move there. Meantime, Oliver, 1.3 seconds clear, now 1.2 seconds clear of Dan Zelos. Can Zelos chip away enough, still with 12 minutes and a lap to go, to have a go for the race lead before the very end?
Suddenly came down a bit through Copse. I don't know whether Oliver made a mistake. I have to assume he did, because it's now going back the other way again towards 1.5 seconds. But Zelos is getting away from the cars behind. Bird is falling back into the clutches of the pair of Peugeots, Isaac Smith and Alex Toth-Jones, who are still tied together by that very short piece of string. Toth-Jones peaks to the inside at Brooklands, but it's a late apex there, isn't it? The natural line is to turn in quite late, and it leaves that very inviting gap on the inside, which the attacking car can sometimes try and use. It didn't work that time for Toth-Jones, but it did for Max Coates, who's ahead of Marshall now for 6th.
Max Edmondson going through, is on the back of Senna Proctor then, so 9th and 10th come through Woodcote. Mike Epps 11th, just ahead of Jordan Brennan. So Mike Epps has kept himself there or thereabouts in terms of points. What he's also doing is putting himself on the front row, if things stay as they are, for that reversed or semi-reversed grid for race 2. So Mike Epps might not necessarily bank that many points out of the first race, but crucially he's ahead of Max Goff, and he could be starting from the front row for race 2.
Yeah, and Callum Newsham is a full second behind Jordan Brennan in 12th place, so the chances of any of Mike's other championship rivals breaking into that front row for race 2 are perhaps a little slim at the moment. This battle is bubbling away quite nicely here, isn't it? And it's starting to, the intensity level is starting to go up and up and up with each lap, because the Peugeots are getting themselves closer together, they're spurring each other on, and they're getting closer to Max Bird, and I think that Max Coates is starting to drag Dave Marshall towards this group as well, so top 2 breaking away and sort of matching each other's lap times right now, but 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th places within the next lap or so, I reckon, are going to be absolutely together.
Yeah, Marshall as well, of course, he's gaining a place in terms of points through Max Coates not scoring. So as they head out of Copse Corner, Dan Zelos shaking off Max Bird. So this is the battle pack, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th and back, heading up towards Beckett's. Now, is this significant as well? With taking the pressure off Dan Zelos, would he now be able to close on Charlie Oliver? Is that gap going to come down? We will see. But for 3rd, 4th, 5th, they are as one. And then 6th and 7th, Coates and Marshall run together. This is Dave Marshall's view down towards Brooklands. Is there a gap on the inside line? He's thinking about it, but doesn't commit. Elects to stay there. He doesn't need to get past Max Coates. Perhaps he can just settle for the points, knowing that Coates doesn't score. Meantime, up the road ahead, Toth-Jones goes round the outside of Isaac Smith. That may not end well for him. Let's see. It also brings Coates and Marshall that little bit closer as they come through Woodcote. Oliver is getting away. 2nd is Zelos. 3rd just is Max Bird. Then it's Smith, Toth-Jones, Coates, Marshall, Newsham Senior, Edmondson and Proctor to round out the top 10.
I think Dave Marshall's doing exactly the right thing here. He knows that Coates isn't taking any points away from him, but Coates is possibly quick enough to drag him up to that next group. You really need that slipstream round here, and they've definitely got it now. They're close enough to the cars ahead to get that advantage down the straight, and Max Coates already going on the attack, actually just taps the tail of Toth-Jones's Peugeot as they come out of Beckett's corner. That little side-by-side run between Alex and Isaac through Luffield really delayed them. It brought Coates and Marshall closer and allowed Max Bird just to break away by a few car lengths. We'll see if he can make good his escape now, whether they'll be able to reel him back in again. But this is getting closer and closer by the lap, and now that Marshall and Coates have caught these three, we might see Dave go back on the attack now to get ahead of Max and try and start attacking people that he can actually take championship points away from.
Meantime, Charlie Oliver is building this gap over Dan Zelos. It was around the 1.6 second mark, so it was going up, not coming down. 12 laps are now done, and the gap is 1.7 seconds as a rather scrappy Toth-Jones turns through Copse. Max Coates right up there behind him. Then you've got Dave Marshall in 7th place. Where is Epps in all of this? 12th brackets 11th in terms of points, so he's falling back a little in terms of the race order. He's still good enough to be on the front row, but of course if he lost another place to Callum Newsham, suddenly he finds himself way back going into the start of race 2. So he's on the bubble, isn't he, Epps, for 12th on the road as Coates comes up now to have a go at Toth-Jones down towards Brooklands. He's on the outside line. Dave Marshall looks to try to buy into this as Max Coates hustles the car through the left, gets a tighter line. He's up the curb, he's on the outside line going into Luffield, and for the moment at least Toth-Jones fends him off. Then Max tries to get up the inside. Remember, he comes from 2 schools of hard knocks, does Max Coates, Clios and Minis. He knows all about racecraft, but right now Toth-Jones stays ahead of him.
Yeah, and Coates had to just back out of that second move through Luffield. That loses him momentum through Woodcote, and it means that Dave Marshall's right on his rear bumper again going through Copse Corner. Brilliant battle this. Dave Newsham is the next man that might buy into it all as well. He's less than a second behind them now. Here in 10th place is Senna Proctor. To your point about Mike Epps' 12th position, you can actually see in the background it is very perilous because Callum Newsham, I made mention of the fact a couple of laps ago that he was a second behind Mike Epps. Well, now he's only about a car length adrift. So Mike Epps in 12th place. Look, the Hyundai is right behind him as they go onto the Wellington Straight. And Mike really desperately needs to try and hang on to that pole position for race number 2. Under braking for Brooklands, then no move there. Behind him, things starting to get very, very interesting.
Yeah, for third place, Max Bird and Isaac Smith as one. So Isaac, for the moment, getting away from Alex Toth-Jones, who's having to go defensive because he has got Coates and Marshall right up behind him. Dave Newsham is there for 8th. Meantime, Charlie Oliver, dare one say, is edging towards a maiden win here. He's 1.8 seconds ahead of Zelos. He's creeping ahead. 6 minutes and a lap still remain. And Charlie Oliver, from pole position, is doing everything absolutely right at the moment as Isaac Smith there heads up towards Beckett, closes a little under braking, locks the rears, turns into the right, but Max Bird fends him off. Still there, good for third place.
Yeah, but good pace this from Isaac Smith as soon as Toth-Jones was busy defending from Coates, so Smith was able to get back after Max Bird. That gap was up to the better part of a second initially when Bird made his first break for freedom, but Isaac Smith has very much reeled him back in again. But as these two start to battle, of course, the concertina effect comes into force again and the cars behind get closer and closer and closer. Speaking of close, that is how close Callum Newsham is to the championship leader, first and foremost, and also provisional pole position for race 2. So getting this 12th place has double significance here for Callum Newsham. He's caught Mike Epps, but where does he find a way through? Mike has proven, hasn't he, this year? Not an easy man to pass.
Absolutely right. So, what have we got left? Just over 5 minutes, plus the regulation lap. Callum Newsham dives down towards Cox, hustles through the right-hander, avoids all that runoff on the outside line, the Formula 1 safety tarmac. Pit out to your right, and then head now up through Maggot, stand on the brakes, get into Beckett. He inches up there onto the tail of Epps going into Beckett. This is a significant battle, not really for points, but for possibly the outcome of race 2, because it will determine who gets pole for the second race of the day. And in 4 minutes and change plus a lap, there is time left for Callum Newsham to get himself onto pole.
If either of these two drivers can get themselves on pole for race 2, you really wouldn't bet against them winning. And Callum, remember, is only 12 points behind Epps in the championship. He's down in 5th place, but it's that tight that could easily be overturned with a good result in race 2, especially if Epps is once again languishing in the midfield. So that is a really significant battle. This one is a really entertaining battle. And look at the way that Toth-Jones has really got away from Coates. All of a sudden, in the last 2 laps or so, the Powermax liveried Peugeot, third car in this group, has really started to up its pace, perhaps as others are now starting to run into some tyre difficulties. Maybe Alex is not, because his pace at this stage of the race looks really good.
We have, of course, got driver of the day to think about. Jack Keithley might be just worthy of a thought, because having had his dramas on the first lap, we thought it was a connection-related issue. He caught up, he's in 14th, so he's in the points. And, of course, take Max Coates out of the equation, he gains another place worth of points for his efforts. And he's not done yet either. Of course, Jack Keithley is the next man in the queue behind Callum Newsham, who there is all over Mike Epps like a rash. And if this gets a little bit too toey, then Jack Keithley might be able to find a way past them. So, as they squabble, and they are absolutely nose to tail now coming through Woodcote, Jack Keithley in 14th place is almost with them.
Yeah, that gap is going to disappear, I think, because Epps is going to really have to get his elbows out over the final few laps to keep Callum Newsham at bay. They're almost wheel to wheel going into Copse Corner, coming out of Copse Corner. It's the same story for third place. Isaac Smith making a move on Max Bird, goes to the outside at Beckett's corner. That's not going to work, surely. Well, there's a bit of a side-to-side contact there as Bird tries to force Smith wide. It worked. Smith is slow off the corner, and so the Honda stays ahead. Right, what about Newsham and Epps? Much the same situation here, really. Epps is now defending. Newsham can't get through, and already on this lap, Keithley has taken about 3/4 of a second out of them.
Absolutely right. He's charging as Smith goes ahead of Toth-Jones again, going through Brooklands. Max Bird hangs on to that third place. Isaac Smith, Alex Toth-Jones still squabbling as best they can behind Max Bird without tripping over each other. They both think they've got the pace to be ahead of Bird, but they haven't done it yet. Max Coates right there behind them as well. Now, what about Epps? He's fending off Newsham, who in turn is fending off Keithley, but they're all bunching up as they come across the line. Smith goes through Copse Corner, running in 4th. Does Callum Newsham think about making a move on the inside into Copse? He doesn't, but he's close enough. Does the move come at Beckett's, I wonder?
He's had a good exit there, right up over the rumble strips on the exit. Ahead of them, meanwhile, there was a mistake for Toth-Jones at Copse Corner, so Max Coates needed no second invitation to try and take advantage of that. He gets himself alongside, but he has to go the long way round at Beckett's, and they are actually not wheel to wheel. The Peugeot comes off the corner better on the tight line, and so Toff Jones retains fifth. This is backing Coates back up into Dave Marshall again, and the three of them starting to get very close together as we get very close to the end of the race. It's rather flown by this, a minute and a half or so plus the regulation lap still to go, and so many battles still to be settled. This still a battle that's raging for race 2 pole position, with Epps somehow hanging on.
Yeah, this is becoming a very wide car indeed, isn't it then? Mike Epps with the 10/10 coaching Peugeot 308 fending off Callum Newsham, and Jack Keithley is almost there. We're going to be able to get possibly 3 more laps out of this as they dive down towards Copse. Now Newsham makes his move on the outside line. Jack Keithley is closing as well. Newsham doesn't get through on the inside into Copse. What about on the way up towards Beckett's? He's also got to be mindful of where Keithley is. They go 3 wide across the road. Can Keithley get ahead of Newsham? Yes, he can. Can Keithley get ahead of Epps as they turn into Beckett's? No, he can't. But this might just save Mike Epps. If Newsham and Keithley start squabbling, he might be able to pull away. But Keithley, of course, is in a much lighter car than those of either of the 2 drivers around him, and he's on a mission.
Yeah, he's almost pushing Epps down the Wellington straight, goes to the outside, to the inside, there's contact in a straight line, that won't go down too well. Epps manages to hang on to it, Newsham back to the outside. It's got trouble written all over it, this battle, hasn't it? And these are 3 potential championship contenders here. This could be a really significant battle when we get to the end of the season at Brands Hatch in a couple of weeks' time. Out of the final corner they go. They're going to have 2 more laps to go, aren't they? This and 1 more. And still, any one of those 3 drivers could get the race 2 pole. Keithley alongside into Copse corner. That's the outside line into the quick right-hander. Callum Newsham tries to fill the gap on the right. No way through. There's more contact between Keithley and Epps. It's getting physical now.
All of this then for pole position for race 2. Keithley has the run. He's got the much lighter car. And don't forget, he out-qualified both of these. He's wide into Beckett, so he can't get past Epps. The door is open for Newsham, who is back through on the inside line. So Callum Newsham then retakes the place, does he, as they come out of the corner. He's ahead of Epps as well. He's done it. So Newsham dive bombs the pair. He gains 2 places out of all of that, and suddenly Newsham's on pole for race 2. Epps comes late on the brakes down to Brooklands, goes back through, retakes the place. Brilliant racing this. Keithley around the outside of Newsham, can't make it stick. Epps drops back behind the pair of them, out of all of which it is then Callum Newsham 12th, Keithley is 13th. Yes, Epps 14th, but he's not giving up. He's back on the inside of Jack Keithley as they come through now to start the last lap of the race. But Newsham, 12, needs to try to make a break here.
Yeah, and I think he will now. I'm not sure even Jack Keithley can reel him in over this final lap. That gap is several car lengths as they go out of Copse corner for the final time of what has been another brilliant race. It's been fairly quiet at the very front of the field, but behind the top 2, so many dices, and many of them with championship implications. Charlie Oliver, though, well on his way finally to that first race win. And this one, I reckon he should be able to keep.
Yeah, I can't think he's been involved in too many scrapes. It's behind him, though. We need to be looking. But let's call him across the line, because Charlie Oliver is going to be a race winner then, finally, in the MSL FastR Touring Car eSeries with Max Racing, powered by VRRC. Second is Dan Zelos for his best of the year. Third should be Max Bird as he heads up then towards the line. It is Isaac Smith goes 4th. Alex Toff Jones, the Power Max Racing, 5th, ahead of Dave Marshall. Then Max Coates. Dave Newsham is 8th. Max Edmondson 9th. Senna Proctor 10th. Jordan Brennan 11th. And pole for race 2 goes the way of Callum Newsham, just ahead of Jack Keithley, with Mike Epps next in the line. So, a great race, a great drive by Charlie Oliver, but perhaps even more, we're looking forward to race 2, because that is a really jumbled grid. Callum Newsham starting on pole position. Jack McIntyre goes through a long way back in 17th place. But Charlie Oliver has done it 3.5 seconds to the good, with Dan Zelos then taking his best yet in second place. Max Bird, third, ahead of Isaac Smith. Alex Toth Jones, fifth from Dave Marshall, and then the non-point scoring Max Coates. It's Dave Newsham, eighth, Max Edmondson, ninth, and Senna Proctor rounds out the top 10 from Jordan Brennan, and Callum Newsham's 12th, good enough for pole for race 2. Right, 3 happy drivers to hear from, especially Charlie Oliver. Pole and a race win, finally. And all being well, Andy McEwan should be with him.
Yeah, it doesn't get much better than that, does it? A race win from pole position, and Charlie, you really didn't have any company there. You built a nice gap at the start, then the safety car came out, and you just built that gap up again. And I was waiting as the race went on for the lap times to start going away. I thought surely he's used his tyres too much, but no, you had the pace to stroke it home.
Yeah, I mean, the start was pretty tight. I got to tell you, the heart rate was pretty high there. battling with Jack. He nearly got me twice. I outbraked myself a bit at turn 2. But then after that, yeah, it was pretty good. And just keeping the consistency. You know, you get into a zone, and once you're in there, you can't get woken up really. So you just keep on pumping the lap times. And yeah, it was good enough.
It was more than good enough. I mean, 3.5 seconds is one of the biggest winning margins we've had all season. But of course, the flip side of that is now you have to start 12th from race 2. And
yes.
It's relatively difficult when the field is this evenly matched around a track like this to make progress, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so the thing here is going to be to try and avoid incidents. And we're going to be racing hard with them. But like I said before, there's a lot of space on this track. So hopefully we can make some progress. If we get in the top 5, I'd be pretty happy with the end of today.
Well, that sounds like a plan. Best of luck in that second race, Charlie.
Thank you.
Excellent performance in race 1, though.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Charlie Oliver, then your race winner from the first race here at Silverstone. Race 2 on its way, so don't go anywhere. Just a few minutes away from the gridding up process beginning there. Before that, though, let's have a word with our second place finisher, shall we? Dan Zelos. Dan, another brilliant run to second place. You got your first podium at Croft a week ago. And now we can't stop you. Is Silverstone a circuit that you've gone well at in the real world?
It always is. It's you know, it's a very hard track. The toe means a lot in real life racing, and it does the same in here. You can see it in qualifying. So, but no, I mean, Charlie explained it brilliantly. You know, it's just about keeping out of trouble. We've got a lot of space here, and you know, once I was able to get a bit of a gap in front of me to start hunting him down, I did my best to chase him. But Charlie drove really well. I had a little bit more than me today. But hopefully, in this reverse grid, we can maybe work together, get further forward, and get another good result.
Yeah, I mean, it did seem like once the safety car had come in and Charlie built up that gap, that there wasn't really much point, really, in you risking too much. I spoke to Charlie pre-race about how important it is to manage the tyres around here. So was that kind of your plan in the end? Once you realised that Charlie wasn't going to be caught, it was just a case of holding on to that second?
Yeah, it was about managing the gap behind me too. You know, it's very easy to run track limits on the exit of turn 1. You know, just dip a little bit of a wheel and you get a track cut, and you only get 4 warnings and then drive through. So I was managing that as well. I got a couple on the first few laps, so I had to kind of calm myself down and just concentrate on being as consistent as I could. And yeah, a really enjoyable race. It was good to be racing at the front, and yeah, see how we go in this one.
Good stuff. Well, congratulations on the second place in the first race, Dan. Best of luck for race 2. Third place went the way of Max Bird. Now, Max, unlike Dan and Charlie, who had pretty quiet, uneventful races, you didn't. You had some company in that one, didn't you?
Yeah, just a bit. Isaac was quick from the get-go, really. I think I overheated my tyres through that safety car period, and then from then on, I just sort of had a struggle to try and keep everyone behind me. But yeah, Isaac was definitely quicker.
But defending is a big part of touring car racing, and at a track where there are quite a few places you have to watch your mirrors, where people can maybe make a move. It was a really impressive drive to keep them behind, given you were under pressure basically from start to finish.
Yeah, so that I was braking slightly earlier into all the corners, trying to get that, you know, that momentum off the corner and get a good exit, because I knew that if I could keep them behind down the straight, they're not going to try and come past through the corners. So yeah, I think just maintain the gap and then try again in this one.
Yeah, what are your thoughts then, coming from 10th on the grid now in race number 2? It's going to be a busy first few laps, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Try and keep out of the carnage. But hopefully, as Charlie said, top 5 would be a good little result for the 2 races today. And yeah, we'll see how we go on.
Looking forward to it. Max, congratulations on the podium. Good luck for the reverse grid race.
Thank you.
So there you have it then, our podium finishers. Max Bird third, Dan Zelos second, and Charlie Oliver, with that win now, is moving right into championship contention. I have him now 4th in the championship, just 2 points off second. Still, David, we're now only 5 races from the end of the season, and it's still no clearer as to who the favourites are.
No, indeed. And you take from the results of the first race, Max Goff, who was only 19th. We rather forgot about him with respect in the end because of all the other fierce fights going on around, but he had a pretty torrid time of that. So Max, with the weight, struggled in qualifying, struggled in the race as well, and he now finds himself dropping away in the order. So race 2 is almost good to go, in fact. So it is Callum Newsham on pole position. And remember, he's got 39 kilos of weight on board. Jordan Brennan lining up with him at the front of the grid. 27 kilos of weight on board. Second row, Senna Proctor, he's got 21 kilos, and then number 4, Max Edmondson, ballast free. Third row, Dave Newsham, weight free, and so too is Max Coates. Then Dave Marshall is on row 4 with 33 kilos, Alex Toth-Jones alongside him. Isaac Smith comes next, he's got 9 kilos. Max Bird is weight free alongside. Dan Zelos and Charlie Oliver are next as the lights are about to go out, and we go racing with a good getaway being made by Dave Newsham for the third row, but then all the gaps close ahead of him. But diving through on the inside line, Jordan Brennan, I reckon it is. He's going to hit the front as they get into Copse Corner for the first time. Charlie Oliver then starting 12th, trying to work his way forward. Callum Newsham just, though, has the advantage as they come out of Copse. Max Edmondson is alongside him as they get to Beckett. And Callum Newsham turns in ahead. Edmondson goes out wide, and up through the traffic goes Senna Proctor.
Yeah, Senna Proctor challenging for the lead now. He's alongside Dave Newsham going down the Wellington Straight. This will become the outside for Brooklands, but you can, if you're really feeling brave, make this work and get the inside for Luffield. Let's see what happens then. Newsham on the right, Proctor on the left, Jordan Brennan behind them, looking to pick up the pieces if it goes wrong, which it nearly does for Proctor. Brilliant bit of car control there. He floors the throttle, brings the front end back around, but it means that Callum Newsham retains the race lead. Alex Toth-Jones is getting elbowed out a bit wide there, coming through Luffield as well, and he's off the road completely, heavily into the wall for Toth-Jones. Must have been further contact coming off the corner, and sadly one of the stars of race 1 is out of contention already.
So Callum Newsham leads at the end of the opening lap from Senna Proctor. Dave Newsham is third. They're going through fourth is Dave Marshall. Behind is everybody else really. For fifth, Isaac Smith just ahead of Max Edmondson, who's yo-yoed a bit on the opening lap. Max Coates is seventh ahead of Zelos. Charlie Oliver already up to ninth. Max Bird has dropped back. Jack Heathley runs 11th. Where's Mike Epps? He's 13th then, trying to make progress forward, but he's not getting there just yet. Max Goff is 17th, and Alex Toth-Jones tries to regroup after his dramas on the first lap. So Callum Newsham, who has had, as we saw earlier on in the year, 2 race wins, now tries to get away from the pack as they go through Brooklands. Charlie Oliver, though, is having to make that car very wide indeed to keep Dan Zelos at bay.
Yeah, right behind Max Coates, just ahead of Zelos. These are some of the front runners from the previous race, but Oliver, look, has gained 4 positions already. That's a really decent first couple of laps for the race 1 winner. Again, looking to try and make good on the pace that he's clearly enjoying this weekend. Only 9 kilos in that Audi, and so he should be able to move forward from there. On board now with Dave Newsham in third. He tries to play rear gunner, I guess, for his son now, because this is a really important race for Callum, having fought so hard to get himself the track position here in reverse grid pole position. He needs really to try and deliver a win. If he can win this race and Mike Epps is outside the top 10, Newsham Jr. takes the points lead with 2 rounds to go, so this is a really crucial race.
Although perversely for Dave Newsham, he is in one of the lightest cars up at the front of the field, so in theory he should have the pace to win the race. Max Coates goes through Brooklands 6th-ish, keeping Max Edmondson at bay, but Max crawling all over Max as they go into Luffield then, but Coates keeps the position for the moment. Zelos is all over the back of Charlie Oliver, who is in turn looking for a way past Max Edmondson. That could all get ugly before the end, couldn't it? Could end in tears as 6th and back comes up toward the line. Jack Heathley remains a man to watch also at the rear of this little group to see what further progress his Audi can make, but with 3 laps in the book, Newsham is not getting away from Senna Proctor for the race lead.
No, not really. Proctor coming back at him here, isn't he? After Callum made an initial break in the first lap or so, now Proctor is looking maybe the quicker of the 2. Dave Marshall right on the tail of Isaac Smith. Dave Marshall could do with some a good result here. 10 points scored out of the first race, 6th or joint 5th actually with Robbie Stapleford. I've got him in the points. It's almost a joint lead here between Callum Newsham and Senna Proctor in the race. They're overlapping as they go into Brooklands. Callum Newsham having to defend, and he'll be thinking now, come on, Dad, come and help me out here. If Dave Newsham can apply the pressure to Senna Proctor, that will make Callum's life an awful lot easier.
Now, something has happened out of shot between Charlie Oliver and Max Edmondson, because they've fallen to 20th and 21st places respectively. So they've had a moment and have fallen way down the order, and of course out of the points. So Charlie Oliver, winner of the first race, now finds himself in all sorts of strife. He's behind the recovering Alex Toth-Jones there, but he's got a lot of work to do now to buy back points. So you win in race 1, but you lose in race 2. That seems to be the story of the day. It's 3 for the race lead, though, and Proctor all sideways at Beckett. Up the inside of Dave Newsham goes Isaac Smith. Up the inside of Proctor goes Isaac Smith, and he's going to come out second, coming on to Wellington Straight. Brilliant move.
Well, not quite what Callum Newsham had in mind when he was asking his dad for help, but that has kind of worked, hasn't it? Because it's delayed the pack behind, and it's given Callum a bit more of a gap than he's had at any point. But Isaac Smith into second place is a danger here. Isaac is quick and has absolutely no ballast in that Peugeot, so Isaac Smith might be able to go after Callum Newsham in front. Senna Proctor is still third, was lucky to get away with that actually. Dave Marshall fourth, Dave Newsham then in fifth, and then along come Max Coates, Dan Zelos, Max Bird, Jack Keithley, Jordan Brennan, Jack McIntyre as well. Basically, the top 11 cars here are getting themselves closer and closer together with every lap.
They are indeed, with Mike Epps still in 12th place, but 11th for points, because remember, there's the, if you like, invisible Max Coates, can't score points in the guest car. Up now then, through Maggots into Beckett's, and Alex Toth-Jones and Charlie Oliver have had a coming together now as well, further back, so with both of them trying to regroup, tripping over one another. So look back as you hit Wellington Straight. Isaac Smith hanging on to second. Remember, he has had 2 race wins this year. He's only got 9 kilos of weight in the car as David Ward comes up to have a go at Stuart Lyons, and in so doing has got James Merrills alongside him as they drop down towards Brooklands now. Ward on the outside line, Merrills on the in, and they're still side by side all the way through the corner. That's going to give David Ward the inside for Luffield, but James Merrills briefly ahead. We've also got Max Goff behind them, and he's trying to get into the points, don't forget.
Yeah, Max Koff's second in the championship, but a bad race here could see him drop outside of the top 10. It's that close in the points. So, yeah, important for Goff to try and salvage something, anything from this. But even if he gets past both David Ward and James Merrills, that still doesn't put him in the points. Stuart Lyons there in the green and white Hyundai is in 15th at the moment, the last car to be scoring points. Out of Copse Corner then goes that little group. Through Beckett's come the leaders. Isaac Smith is coming back at Callum Newsham, so Newsham just does not have the raw pace here to do what Charlie Oliver did in race 1 and stretch out a comfortable lead. He's going to have to defend from Isaac Smith very shortly, just as Senna Proctor is driving defensively to try and keep Dave Marshall at bay.
But bear in mind, Callum Newsham has got 39 kilos, whereas Charlie Oliver didn't have to worry about ballast. So it is a heavier car, and it's 30 kilos heavier than the one that's chasing him. Isaac Smith then, here he comes, out of Luffield now, through Woodcote Corner, up towards the timing line once more. This to put 7 laps in the book. The margin just a fifth of a second, but Smith has got the speed, he's got the momentum, and the car is light enough to carry him forward. He closes under braking going into Copse. Interesting how relatively few people challenge there. They plan the move through Copse and make it here going up towards Beckett's. Is this going to work? Outside for Maggots, inside line for Beckett. Stand on the brakes, and Smith does get up the inside line. He's got the gap, he's got the room, and now he's got the lead.
Oh, if I was Callum Newsham, I wouldn't be fighting this, and yeah, he sensibly drops in line behind. He had a gap there behind Isaac Smith to drop back into the queue, whereas if he ran side by side with Isaac for a corner or so, the chasing pack would have been right with him, and then all of a sudden you either go out of it with the race lead or you end up 5th or 6th because you get shuffled out of line, NASCAR style, and you just can't get back in. So Callum did the sensible thing there, realised he was beaten under braking through Beckett, let Isaac Smith get out of the corner ahead, and now he'll try and sit in the wheel tracks of the Peugeot, maybe work with the leader to try and get away from everyone else. Second place for Callum Newsham is not as good as a win, but it's better than losing another 2 or 3 places.
Robbie Stapleford, Martin Richards, Stuart Lyons have all had a tangle, and so too Dave Newsham and Max Coates have had a coming together. So there are dramas all around at Silverstone as Isaac Smith then goes for win number 3. Dan Zelos there is trying to find a way into the top 6. Where is Epps? He's still only 12th, and Jordan Brennan, having been on the front row, has fallen way back into 11th place. So that's the order. Smith, Newsham Jr., Proctor, then Marshall, then Coates, Newsham Senior, Zelos, that's your top 7. Max Bird runs 8th, and then what do we have behind that? Jack Keithley 9th, and they're all in a queue. Any one of those could yet win this.
There's no gap bigger than about 3 or 4 tenths between any of the top 9 cars, is there? The first real gap is between Keithley and McIntyre, 9th and 10th, and in some cases you can measure the gaps in inches rather than tenths of a second. Max Coates almost pushing Dave Marshall along as they come out of Luffield and through Woodcote, the Hyundai closing in, and I think does actually give him a tap, bit of bump drafting down the straight there from Coates, because he can see the top 3 cars are getting away, and whilst he would love to get past Dave Marshall and set off after the leaders himself, he knows that running side by side with the current 4th place driver is only going to lose them more time. So he's trying to spur Dave on, I think, so that they can close back in on the leading 3. Isaac Smith, Callum Newsham and Senna Proctor. Oh, as Zelos there almost gets into the side of Dave Newsham.
There's time for it to happen. 10 minutes. We've still got half the race to go. The first half's been pretty lively. We are not done yet. So Zelos then, latecomer to the championship, but showing good pace. Dives from one side of the road to the other. Gets up the inside of Dave Newsham. Was there contact? I think there was, but Dave comes out ahead then. Former Legends champion, former Clio Cup champion Dave Newsham, as well as a touring car race winner. Zelos round the outside at Luffield, but the danger is the door is open and he might lose out to Max Bird. He does, so Bird goes ahead of him. Jack Keithley is there as well, looking to make a move. Jack McIntyre is catching in 10th place. This is Jack Mack's view as they go over the line down towards Cops Corner, brake hard, turn right, and Jack Keithley just there ahead of him. In the mirror, meantime, there's Jordan Brennan trying to close, but the race leader, Isaac Smith, is now 1 second clear of Senna Proctor as Jack McIntyre dives to the outside of Jack Keithley going into Beckett's. This is his view.
Yeah, Keithley getting delayed there by Zelos' defensive driving, so it opened up the opportunity maybe for McIntyre to go the long way round, which he's done, and now he's got a slipstream from the cars ahead. He might be able to get the inside for Brooklands. I think he will. So Jack McIntyre going for 9th place here at the expense of Keithley, who could do without this. Keithley's not really making the electrifying progress through the field that I kind of thought he might. He's been one of the pace setters this weekend and really regained ground after his connection issues in race 1 quite quickly, but race 2 not quite going to plan. He does fend off Jack McIntyre, but that's the best he can manage for the time being. A word on Mike Epps, by the way, despite all of these drivers falling over each other ahead of him, he is still 2.5 seconds nearly behind them, so Epps just doesn't have the speed to catch them. He's under no pressure, so 12th place is pretty much in the bag, I guess, but he would love to be a part of this battle and gaining more points.
There he is, not looking very happy about life, is he? And is he falling away? Now, we know the weight does have an effect here. Has he picked up damage early on, possibly, which might be affecting the pace of the car? But that looked like a rather downbeat Mike Epps. He's not catching, he's struggling. Look at the facial expressions. He's all a bit fed up, isn't he?
He almost shrugged his shoulders there coming out of Beckett's. That was, yeah, he looks as if he'd rather be anywhere else, really. But this is sort of the kind of race, actually, that can make a champion, isn't it? Because, okay, he's not starring at the front of the field, he's not scoring the big points, but the handful of points, 4 points that he'll score for that 12th place could prove to be so crucial at the end of the year. We see championships time and time again won by 1, 2, 3 points. This one is shaping up to be much the same thing, so worth sticking at it, even if it's not the most thrilling race of his life. 12th place could still prove to be significant.
Pit stop for Robbie Stapleford then, so he falls down the order. We'd lost Max Edmondson from the race, and I think Robbie Stapleford has actually disconnected, so he's a retirement therefore. So we lose Robbie Stapleford, who has also been a race winner this year. Now look, Smith's getting away, he's checked out, but up into 2nd place, Max Coates. We've rather ignored that as we've been looking at other things, but Max, who struggled with the weight on home soil at Croft, is driving a ripper race here into 2nd place, ahead of Senna Proctor then, the two near neighbours together, and for 4th it's Callum Newsham ahead of Dave Marshall. Dave Newsham is 6th, Bird, Zelos, McIntyre, Keithley rounds out the top 10, but Max Coates has stormed his way through the traffic to the head of that queue. Can he shake him off? Can he go after the race leader? This is Callum Newsham, he's 4th, and he's going for 3rd as they come off Woodcote, but he's also under attack from Dave Marshall. It's all happening around him.
Yeah, Newsham ran very wide through Luffield, just opened the door for Dave Marshall, but Dave Newsham now comes up the inside to try and claim that place away. That just lets Callum off the hook for a moment or two. There's been a big sort out here, hasn't it? Because they're in nothing like the same order they were in the last time we saw this group. It is, again, one of those pressure cooker races where they're all so close together, one little spark can ignite a real explosion of activity, and I think that's exactly what has happened here. Not good news for Callum Newsham, though. He is now off the podium. Dave Newsham looks back at a side-by-side Dan Zelos and Max Bird. Bird on the inside in the Honda sends it into the corner as late as he dares, but you can hang around the outside there to get the inside for Luffield, or indeed drive into the car you're trying to pass and get the place that way. So Dan Zelos does muscle his way through. 7th place now for the Orange Golf.
And Max Bird drops back then as the traffic is set to come swarming past if he's not careful. So Zelos Pro Tem is 7th, Bird 8th. McIntyre has got himself ahead of Keithley, so a change for 9th and 10th. I was hoping Jack Keithley might be able to continue making progress from there, but it's to no avail. James Merrills is 14th at the expense of Stuart Lyons. The lead gap has gone up from 2.1 to 2.4 seconds as Zelos and Bird are still battling as they come up towards Beckett's with back through on the inside line Max Bird. Zelos on the outside line. Has he got the pace to stay there? Let's see. Jack McIntyre challenges on the inside line coming out of Beckett's, and Keithley is lined up to have a go at all of them, taking Brennan with him. Right, down to Brooklands. Who came out of that best as contact as Zelos got a bit of a tag from Max Bird. Well, it's anybody's order that, isn't it? Zelos just ahead, but I think McIntyre is the big winner.
Yeah, Zelos manages to hold on, but that was dangerously close to a big accident there. I didn't think Zelos was going to catch that. McIntyre is indeed back up the inside of Max Bird as they race out of Luffield. One corner further up the road through Woodcote, though. This is the fight for 4th place. Now, it is important here that Callum Newsham tries to hang on to this position, but I don't think he will, because Dave Marshall's up the inside. He goes through into 4th place, and Callum now has to try and fend off his own father for 5th. Dave Newsham dutifully falls into line behind him. At least, therefore, it shouldn't get much worse than 5th place for Callum Newsham, but considering he was staring down the barrel of a race win at the start of the race, he will not be too happy with how this one's worked out.
Charlie Oliver has got a drive-through penalty for track limit abuse, so he was out of the points anyway. If he doesn't serve it, it'll be a 30-second time penalty added on at the end of the race, so we need to keep an eye as to whether he does indeed drive through the pit lane. As Jack McIntyre there, 9th, turns his way through Brooklands, squabbling with Max Bird. He's got Jack Keithley up alongside him, so the two Jacks go side by side, and ahead, that bird is an endangered species. Max Bird has dropped a place to Dan Zelos. He's under attack from the Keithley-McIntyre-Brennan battle that comes up towards the line. Mike Epps next, just waiting for Armageddon ahead of him. I think that he can luck into a whole heap of places, but the two Jacks go side by side down towards Cops. McIntyre on the inside stays ahead.
Well, Mike Epps is finally gaining on this group, but I think he's going to run out of time. He's less than 2 seconds behind them now, so he's gained about a second since I last checked in with him, but yeah, not really enough, is it? Meanwhile, for 6th position, Dan Zelos up the inside of Dave Newsham, so that's another driver that's now going to start applying the pressure to Callum. Dan Zelos has driven well in this one, hasn't he? From 11th on the grid, he's up into the top half dozen now. Dave Newsham is trying to do something about that. Fights back into Brooklands, goes to the outside. It's again a job to know where to look, isn't it? There are battles left, right and centre. Zelos hangs on to 6th. Max Bird, I think, is still 8th place, but Jack McIntyre, Jack Keithley and Jordan Brennan, the 3 Js, all trying to gain ground. We're into, though, the closing stages of another race that has absolutely flown by, way quicker than I'd liked it to, because there has been non-stop action from the moment the race started.
You can imagine the race control team as well thinking, oh, here we go again. It could be a busy week because there have been lots of little incidents, lots of rubs. Nothing massive, I don't think, but there's certainly been lots happening up and down the order. Unless you call Mike Epps, who is inching onto the tail of David Ward, but he has fallen back into 13th place, so he's trying to regroup and get back ahead of him. So it has not been a good race for Mike, sadly. He's in the points, but only just as there. Jack McIntyre goes wide, coming onto Wellington Straight. Jack Keithley 10th. Isaac Smith doing a really impressive job up front, however. And is he a candidate for driver of the day? Surely he must be, because he has, as far as I can see, kept out of trouble.
Yes, which is half the battle, really, isn't it? Sometimes he has had a pretty squeaky clean race. Max Coates in 2nd place, also doing a really good job. Senna Proctor is the first driver with any real work to do in 3rd place. He tries to fend off Dave Marshall, and behind them, Dan Zelos here in 5th. Callum Newsham down to 6th place now, so just 10 points being taken out of this race from a race to pole position. That there's no other way of looking at that, really, other than being a little disappointed with it. He could have done with at least a podium from this one. He'll still take points out of Mike Epps. Not convinced it's now going to be enough to take the championship lead. Martin Richards, meanwhile, trying to get into the points, because Stuart Lyons is in the points, 15th position. If he finishes there, he'll get a little bit closer to breaking even as far as his total points haul for the year is concerned. But look who is closing on them. Charlie Oliver can sniff here a chance to get something out of this second race today.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering whether he's served his drive-through penalty or not yet. Charlie Oliver, has he served it? I confess I didn't notice, but as he comes then now down to Brookland, turns through the corner, And Charlie Oliver all over the back of the Power Max Racing car in the hands of Martin Richards then. But as I say, if he hasn't served the drive-through, you add it on as a time penalty at the end, and then he falls way back. So he's not going to get any points out of this, in total contrast from that epic first race drive that he produced. Isaac Smith then, 2 seconds to the good over Max Coates. In 7th place is Dave Newsham with Max Bird right up behind him. What else is going to shake out of this? They haven't settled down, surely? No, they haven't, because Bird gets up the inside of Newsham, going towards Beckett, but he can't dislodge him there. And for the moment, Callum stays ahead of his father, who is fending off the traffic as best he can.
Dave's car is bearing the marks of a car that's been in the walls. Not the first time we've seen that really this year, but he's been doing his best here to protect his son in front. I think another car is going to slip through the Newsham defences here. Max Bird on the inside at Brooklands corner. Can Dave get himself to the inside into Luffield? I don't think he will. No, the Civic has gone through, and next in line, Jack Keithley. It's relentless, this, isn't it? As soon as one car breaks through, there are another 3 or 4 at least waiting to try and follow them through as well. 2 more laps to go then. Still, this third place battle raging on, and Zelos has caught them now, hasn't he?
He has indeed, and as they dive down towards Copse Corner, then through Dan Zelos, 4th ahead of Dave Marshall. He's going after Proctor for the podium. The race control line says, incidentally, Charlie Oliver ignored penalty, so I fear he might be heading for hot water, and it could be that there's a loss of championship penalty points that way as well. We've lost Max Goff as well. He has retired from the race after a really frustrating day, but again, we've seen it with so many of them. Gain the weight with a good race weekend, and you really struggle at the next. There, in the meantime, Jack Keithley got himself ahead of Jack McIntyre. Senna Proctor versus Dan Zelos for 3rd and 4th. Dave Marshall for 5th. Marshall's not had a bad day, has he? Banking points, not drawing attention to himself necessarily, but just being one of the few to keep out of trouble and bank the points both races.
Yeah, exactly. That's it's that consistency that can do you the world of good over the course of a season. And really, Mike Epps has been doing that up until this point, hasn't he? He's had those 3 wins, but even with weight, he's usually able to bag a good points haul, or at least get something out of the weekend to keep his championship advantage. That might not happen though once we top the points up after this race, which is only less than a lap now from being completed. Dan Zelos on the inside of Proctor for 3rd. He's going to get that at Beckett. So this has been a brilliant drive, this from Dan Zelos. I think he might have to be my pick for driver of the weekend. He has been in sublime form, and one of the few drivers that's really made big progress here from his lowly race 2 grid position.
Callum Newsham has got a drive-through penalty, and he's not going to have time to serve it, so it's going to be a 30-second time penalty, which will drop him way down the order, as Isaac Smith is heading for win number 3 in the MSL FastR Touring Car eSeries with Power Max Racing, powered by VRRC. It's been a mighty drive for him. Isaac Smith then comes through Woodcote Corner. Checkered flag should be at the ready for him. He comes across the line, and Isaac Smith does indeed win race 2 at Silverstone. Max Coates takes 2nd. Great drive by Max. And for 3rd, Dan Zelos ahead of Senna Proctor and then Dave Marshall. It's going to be Max Bird for 6th. On the road, 7th, it's Callum Newsham ahead of Dave. Then the Jacks, Keithley from McIntyre. David Ward is 11th ahead of Jordan Brennan. Mike Epps 13th over the line, but he'll move up with the Callum Newsham situation and also with Max Coates not being eligible to score points. So it could be a whole lot worse for Mike Epps, but a really good drive by Isaac Smith. He's had a yo-yo kind of a season. That, though, just reminds you the kind of pace that he's got, the kind of ability that he's got, as Isaac Smith then takes the race win by just under a 1.5 seconds from Max Coates and Dan Zelos. Great race, but Isaac Smith was able to break away. Max Coates, the runner-up. Dan Zelos for 3rd, ahead of Senna Proctor and Dave Marshall. Max Bird 6th, Callum Newsham 7th on the road, ahead of Dave Newsham, with Jack Keithley 9th. And to round out the top 10 over the line, Jack McIntyre. Then you start to look at penalties, and it's going to be a little bit jumbled on the back of that. But Isaac Smith is the man that took the checkered flag first. Great drive by him, and Andy McEwan should be with our top 3 drivers.
Yes, indeed, who have all got some stories to tell after what was another brilliant reverse grid race here at Silverstone. We'll start with our race winner, Isaac Smith. Isaac, it's been a while since you were on the top step of the podium, but you've actually had a pretty good season. This is your 5th appearance in the top 3. Your first win since Donington, though. That must feel good.
Yeah, it's good, to be honest. Obviously, not at the best of luck at previous rounds, just how it is sometimes. And yeah, I got my head down and we got through the pack. It's not like we started on the front row and just came up through and won it. It was actually quite a challenge. It was a good race, all in all.
Yeah, there was one key moment, I think, when there was a bit of contact up ahead of you. I think it was down at Beckett's, and you suddenly found yourself gaining 2 places, and then you were into second. Was that kind of the moment where you thought, okay, yeah, this is on?
Yeah, well, I watched it happening in front of myself, and obviously I calculated if they're going to touch each other, if we back it up a little bit, we'll be able to get the exit, and it worked perfectly. And we obviously, it worked, and we caught Callum up.
Sorry, go on.
And we caught Callum up, and yeah, we got a good overtake on him, and that came through for the win.
Yeah, a brilliant race win, and off the back of a solid first race. I mean, really, apart from Donington, this is the first weekend where you've had 2 really good races. It's a good time of the season to be finally putting some consistency together.
Yeah, well, obviously we've been a bit up and down, haven't we, before? In the reverse grid races, when you start around 12th, it's extremely difficult. Just because of incidents that happen in front, you get a car that's got a load of weight in front and it backs everybody up. It ends up in carnage usually, but it didn't this time.
You weaved your way through it nicely, Isaac. Huge congratulations on that 3rd win of the year. You're now actually one of only 2 drivers with 3 wins, and the other bloke is leading the championship, so not a bad effort.
Yeah, thank you.
Isaac Smith, then, your race winner in race number 2. Second place, first appearance on the podium for Max Coates. Max, good to have you here. Did you enjoy that one?
Hello. It was good fun, that. I enjoyed making my way through and learning what these TCR cars are all about, really.
They certainly produce good racing. It's pretty close out there sometimes, isn't it?
It is. I think I'm obviously in the mini challenge championship that happens sort of just before this on the Saturday morning, and I think the key difference is that the car is a lot more responsive to kind of the initial turn-in input, and also that it's a lot harder on the tyres. So that's what I've kind of got to get used to, and also that spatial gap between the front of where I sit and where the car is. So yeah, it was good fun though. Some good moves. With Senna and Dave Marshall and Cam Newton and the like. So yeah, it was good fun.
Your thoughts on the whole sim racing movement then, because I know you're someone that I seem to see competing in a lot of these sort of championships. Is this something you've always had an interest in, or are you one of those real world drivers that's caught the sim racing bug over the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, so I got my simulator a couple of years ago now, in 2018, for when I was preparing to go out to Dubai to do the 24-hour race, and basically went the cost of a simulator versus the cost of doing a test out in Dubai. I'll have a simulator, thank you very much, and that way I can use it for the rest of my life, not just for one race meeting. So yeah, my sort of love with the simulator started from there, and then when lockdown hit last year, my involvement became a lot more in that I partner with Rich at VRRC on a number of different championships and work quite closely with him to develop them all. So yeah, now I'm pretty ingrained in it, really.
Well, you're definitely not half bad in it either. Good to see you on the podium here today, and thanks for your support in the championship.
No, it's great to come and have a go in this one, and good to give AOC, who are a keen backer of Rich's VRRC series, their podium.
Nicely done, Max. Congratulations on second place in race number 2, and back on the podium again. I think I said to you in race 1, we can't keep you away now, Dan, and Dan Zelos is once again inside the top 3. A 3rd place, though, from where you started on the grid. Did you expect that?
I think I'm still getting my breath back, to be honest. Were mental. I mean, I've got to take my hats off for Max. It was his second race meeting in the touring cars. I think I was battling with him in 8th. I think it was about a few minutes before the end of the race, and then I looked at the leaderboard again, and he was in on the podium, and I was like, wow, yeah. I was like, what? And then it was just trying to pick off one by one, and it was good to get Senna on the last lap, but he drove really hard for it, and I'm just a little bit lucky as we don't have that ballast, which is affecting so many of these front running guys, and I just wish now if I started the touring car at the beginning of the season where we might have been.
Yeah, it would have been fascinating actually to see you in for the full season, because I think a championship campaign could very much have been on the cards. It was your racecraft in that race, though, that I was most impressed with. That's one of those races where everything's kicking off left, right and centre, where you can quite easily end up doing well, but you can possibly even more easily end up in the weeds somewhere, involved in someone else's accident. You've got to have your wits about you, haven't you, to just survive these race 2s?
definitely. There's a lot of very talented racers out there that have got touring car experience, mini challenge experience, and they all know how to race. And then you've got the sim racers that have got so much experience on this, and you know, they almost know your every move. But no, I was kind of taking it almost like I was in my real Davanti Tyres mini car, going around trying to keep out of trouble, not bring any accident damage back, and just pick off the moves. And I thought it was safe to do so. And yeah, I'm really happy with the result.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant effort. The last 3 races in a row now, you've been in third place, or sorry, in the podium, excuse me. So not bad going, and hopefully you'll be able to continue that run over the final 2 rounds. And Zelos then onto the podium in 3rd position, and that rounds out a pair of absolutely cracking races here at Silverstone. The national circuit, David, it always produces good racing. Actually, before I hand back to David, I will remember to have a word with Rich Hayden, the series director. We're here talking about who our driver of the weekend are, and yet again, there are several candidates, aren't there? I mean, so many drivers that put in real starring performances today.
Yeah, absolutely agree. For me, it's between Dan and Isaac. They both had really good couple of races. So well done to both of them, and obviously everybody else. There's a lot of drivers struggling with ballast that performed well too. But for me, it's Isaac and Dan. And look at that championship table as well.
Yeah, it's super tight, and that's just the way we want it, with now just 4 races to go. We're back at Silverstone in a week's time on the international circuit, then the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit to round it all out. We're at the business end of the season now, and this really is exactly how you would have scripted it if you could. It's so tight, we've still got at least half a dozen drivers realistically in contention. There are the championship standings, actually more than half a dozen really. Epps with just a 1-point advantage now over Isaac Smith 2nd, Dave Marshall 3rd, Callum Newsham 4th, Senna Proctor 5th. Those 5 covered by just 7 points. I mean, you could even go back as far as about 12th place, couldn't you, Rich? And you're still talking about people that could win the championship.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's going to make it a really exciting last 4 races, and I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know about you.
Well, you know, I'm not doing anything for the next couple of weekends. I might just tag along and see what it's like. No, it's going to be really good fun, isn't it, Rich? Yeah. And thanks again for all of your hard work behind the scenes. I mean, it takes quite a lot, doesn't it, actually, to put together a championship like this?
Yeah, absolutely. You can't underestimate the amount of man hours that go into this, both from the broadcast side. Mike Yao puts in a huge amount of work in the background, and obviously Andy Ringland as well with regards to the judiciaries. But with regards to making sure everything runs as best as we can possibly get it, there's a lot of hours that go into it. Yeah.
Well, it is greatly appreciated, especially when the spectacle that we put on is as good as it's been today. Rich, thank you for your thoughts. We'll speak to you again in a week's time at Silverstone, again on the international circuit, David, where we will have our penultimate event of the season. I don't know where the season's gone. It has really flown by in a flash, but it's building up to a proper touring car crescendo, isn't it? I mean, I made it there, about 12 drivers that are still within 20 points or so of the top, and there's only 4 races left.
It's astonishing, isn't it, the way the championship season has bounced like this. The one constant, you could argue, has been Mike Epps, but almost every time we've watched racing, another name has come to the fore as another one has faded. There's Max Goff, 2nd 2 hours ago. He's now down to 7th. Isaac Smith was, 10th? With only 9 kilos of weight. There he is, back in the championship hunt, 2nd. And of course, if he hadn't got 10 penalty points, he'd be ahead of Mike Epps. So it does illustrate actually how at the start of the season people were shooting themselves in the foot in a sense by having those incidents, costing themselves championship points through penalties. But that said, we are in for an outstanding end to the season, and the international circuit next week is going to be a really good leveler, because it's somewhere that the British Touring Car Championship hasn't raced, tested, but never got the race in. It's not one that many people will have raced at, and it's one that I'm looking forward to seeing exactly how the racing works around there, because I've seen that section of the Grand Prix circuit, but it's going to be interesting to see who attacks and how the weight carries around the international circuit. So lots of unknowns next week. What we do know is going to be good racing. So virtually the same place, certainly the same time next week as the Next brace of races in the championship will be on the international circuit at Silverstone, and this long list of potential championship drivers might lengthen a bit, might shorten a bit, depending on what the outcome of those two races are. Mike Epps, though, maintains his championship lead, at least for now, in the MSL FastR Touring Car eSeries with PowerMax Racing, powered by VRRC. In 2 weeks' time, the showdown at Brands Hatch. Next week, though, a very important stage in getting us to that point. 2 races on the international circuit at Silverstone, and they promise to be absolute stunners. We'll see you next week. For now, from Andy McEwan and David Addison, goodbye.
quit. Step back, I'm going in. I'm cranking up on the throttle. This is how legends are made.
Between the two of them, the inside of Coates, Barker gets too heavily involved, and that's Whitehead and Coates.